Urgent. Near Pokrovsk, Putin's troops have suffered heavy losses. First details about the enemy's devastating defeat. Britain is pushing Russia to the brink, tightening the noose of pressure. Storm shadow aimed at Moscow. The US has played its trump cards. One more word from the dictator and the bomb will go off. Russia is in turmoil. The military command has set Putin up. Gerasimov bared his teeth. Putin is breaking off negotiations and urgently leaving the capital. All this in our episode Hell Point. Urgent news straight from the heart of Pokrovsk. The Ukrainian armed forces have severed a vital military artery of the Russian army. Putin's mercenaries have been left with nothing. Generals are bewildered. Entire companies are fleeing the battlefield. The dictator is delusional about victories. Our forces are not retreating. A swarm of drones strikes directly at enemy shelters. The enemy's forces are turned to ashes in an instant. You have to see this. A historic battle is unfolding with renewed force. Don't miss it.
Pokrovsk is on the brink. It seems the Ukrainian armed forces may soon have to retreat and abandon the ruined city. Such grim forecasts are being made more and more often by Western military analysts. The command of the Ukrainian armed forces also acknowledges the full complexity of the situation on this section of the front. However, as for surrendering the city, that is not being discussed at this time. Our soldiers continue to methodically drive out the occupiers who have entrenched themselves in residential buildings. There, the enemy is trying to set up strongholds.
The situation in the city itself is difficult. There are ongoing shifting battles, and accordingly we are clearing them out, both individual houses and specific streets. In certain situations, especially with special forces, the enemy manages to infiltrate specific areas. They set up ambushes and accordingly try to adjust fire, both with drones and artillery against our positions. But now we have learned the enemy's tactics in the city, and accordingly, we are localizing all these points.
The fighting inside the city is for every block, every building, and even individual entrances. Neither side has full control over Pokrovsk. However, the Russian army, despite its losses, is desperately trying to storm the Ukrainian city.
The enemy repeatedly tries to enter from the north. We held our positions there and also struck from the flank. He tried to activate several directions from the south, using both sabotage groups and even moving armored vehicles. We carried out counter-terrorist operations against the groups and used firepower against the vehicles.
The losses of the occupiers near Pokrovsk are so great that Russian contract soldiers are massively refusing to take part in the meat grinder assaults and are simply fleeing their positions. The Russians no longer retrieve their wounded and dead from the streets, and their evacuation teams are being reassigned to assault roles. This state of affairs does nothing to boost the occupiers' courage. According to our partisans, the latter are going AWOL in almost entire groups, destroying their own equipment beforehand.
Agents report the disappearance or desertion of several of their fellow servicemen after a series of targeted strikes by Ukraine's defense forces on Russian military positions on the outskirts of Pokrovsk. Command posts, vehicle parking areas, equipment, and UAV units were hit. Some Russian servicemen link the desertion of Russian soldiers and the strikes on the positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation to each other. Some believe that these servicemen were directly involved in this.
Those few desperate ones who foolishly decided to stay at their positions near Pokrovsk face a hungry and painful death. And all because the defense forces have completely cut off the main logistics route. No more delivery of supplies and ammunition for the occupiers. At least 2 airstrikes were carried out on the road by which the Russians managed to bring some light vehicles into the city, after which the enemy was left without a supply route. Now the occupiers can only reach their positions on foot. And thanks to the dense fire from the Ukrainian armed forces, even that is barely possible. Only a handful managed to do so. Recently, Russian soldiers have resorted to any trick just to avoid being spotted by Ukrainian drones. One of the Kremlin's new so-called analog no inventions is these kinds of makeshift armors. Our defenders have nicknamed them tin cans. They don't make the occupiers any less visible, but they get opened up by FPV drones just like cans. No matter where the occupier tries to hide, our drone operators flush them out even from there. A vivid example of this is right now on your screens. A concrete pipe and the hay that the Russian soldier used for cover did not save the occupier. It's worth giving credit to the Ukrainian pilots. They managed time and again to break into even the most heavily fortified enemy positions and strike enemy equipment with precision. It's gotten to the point where our FPV drones are starting to fly right into Russian shelters. When an FPV drone flies into a dugout or an ammo depot, the occupiers simply have no chance of survival. And the best proof of this is the latest statistics from the armed forces of Ukraine. In the past day, the aggressor country's army has lost about 1,000 of its soldiers. The total losses of the occupiers since the beginning of the full-scale war have exceeded 1,157,000 personnel. The armed forces of Ukraine have already destroyed 11,350 Kremlin tanks, over 23,500 armored fighting vehicles, nearly 35,000 artillery systems, and 1,541 multiple-launch rocket systems.
At last, the United Kingdom has put a definitive end to the question of supporting Ukraine. At this very moment, London is tightening the noose around Moscow's neck. Their patience has run out. Storm Shadow missiles are being shipped straight from the factories. The armed forces of Ukraine are on standby. The strike will reach Russia at lightning speed. Challenger 2 tanks are advancing in columns to tear the enemy apart on the front line. This changes everything. The ally is bombarding Russia with fiery balls of vengeance. Don't miss the first details coming up next.
Due to its weak position at the front, Russia is attacking critically important facilities in Ukraine. Civilian facilities, destruction, and casualties among the population. Russian forces attacked energy facilities in several regions over the past day. Restoration work is ongoing at the sites of the strikes. A very important aspect in this matter is the energy assistance from the United Kingdom. The country, understanding the situation, has allocated over 14 million euros.
Putin is trying to plunge Ukraine into darkness and cold as winter approaches. These vile strikes are not only an attack on Ukraine's security, but also a threat to the economic stability and growth of the United Kingdom.
London has announced the allocation of additional funds for carrying out vital repair work in Ukraine's energy sector to help Ukrainians this winter.
Russia has decided to make Ukraine's civilian energy infrastructure a target in this war. Now, as we enter the cold winter, they are intensifying brutal attacks on energy and heating networks as Putin tries to intimidate the Ukrainian people. However, Ukraine continues to demonstrate exceptional resilience despite all the hardships.
Funding for recovery ensures uninterrupted lighting and heating in the homes of Ukrainians, as well as in hospitals and schools.
We are grateful to the United Kingdom and Prime Minister Keir Starmer for continuing humanitarian and energy support for Ukraine, and for the announced energy assistance package. In a situation where Russia is increasing the number of attacks on civilians and critical infrastructure, such solidarity is extremely important.
London continues to put pressure on Russia through sanctions as well. It has announced new restrictions for the Kremlin, which will be gradually implemented throughout 2026. This is a continuation of sanctions against the oil giants of Putin's associates, Rosneft and Lukoil.
These cowardly strikes pose a threat not only to Ukraine's security, but also to the economic stability of the United Kingdom itself. Ukraine's security is our security. Together with our G7 partners, we stand shoulder to shoulder, supporting Ukraine and overcoming global challenges. From
the very first days of the full-scale war, the United Kingdom became one of Ukraine's key strategic partners, not only by providing weapons, but also by creating effective financial and institutional support mechanisms.
The United Kingdom will continue to resolutely enforce our financial sanctions. As part of our broader response to Russia's barbaric invasion of Ukraine,
the United Kingdom has built an important system of military assistance for Ukraine. Financing, innovative funds, international partnerships, credit mechanisms, and support for Ukraine's defense industrial complex.
It is Russia, not Ukraine, that must pay for Putin's illegal war. Using Russian assets to strengthen Ukraine's air defense is our right. Ukraine's security is critically important to us.
The UK Ministry of Defence has signed contracts with companies for the maintenance of armoured vehicles, the production of artillery shells, and the repair of transferred weapons. These contracts provide for the deployment of repair facilities on the territory of Ukraine. It was the United Kingdom that became one of the first countries to supply Ukraine with high-precision missile weaponry. A real breakthrough was the decision to supply long-range Storm Shadow missiles. In 2023, the British government announced the transfer of cruise missiles capable of striking targets at distances of over 250 kilometers. The Storm Shadow missiles became the first long-range class missiles received by Ukraine and were immediately used to strike strategic targets in the occupied territories. This month, the armed forces of Ukraine received a new batch of Storm Shadow missiles. The United Kingdom has provided the Ukrainian armed forces with protective gear, transport, communications equipment, demining tools, as well as assistance in technical maintenance of equipment and digital transformation. Britain became the first country to announce plans to supply Ukraine with main battle tanks.
Compared to the T-80, this one has much better stabilization and optics. Aiming is done using buttons on the panel, similar to a joystick. The turret rotates 360 degrees in 9 seconds. The Challenger 2 maneuvers, making it difficult for enemy anti-tank guided missiles to aim at it. At the same time, the tank itself is very accurate. In the framework of the supply of tanks,
Challenger 2 tanks were also delivered with ammunition for them. The British tanks were supplemented with specialized repair and recovery vehicles, which made it possible to ensure their technical autonomy in use. In 2025, Ukraine and Britain signed a 100-year partnership agreement. This comprehensive document establishes long-term cooperation between the two countries in the fields of defense, economy, energy, justice, science, culture, education, healthcare, and social policy. Britain's assistance is long-term, so we can always count on the support of a reliable partner.
Putin's Poseidon and Burevestnik are falling apart right before our eyes. The dictator's saber rattling has come to an unexpected end. Trump has unveiled a cutting-edge nuclear missile in response. Shockingly, it remains undetected by enemy radars and is completely unreachable for even the most advanced air defense systems. The US is ahead. What does this signal mean for the world? And first and foremost, for Russia? We'll talk about this in just a moment.
Putin has gone too far. Now the US has responded to the dictator's so-called wonder weapon.
I think that I can still definitely add something new and interesting here, actually.
No, that's definitely everything you could add. It's already been said. First, Putin announced the completion of decisive tests of the intercontinental cruise missile with a nuclear engine, the Burevestnik, which, according to him, has no analogues in the world.
As is known, the Burevestnik has surpassed all known missile systems in the world in terms of flight range, all known missile systems in the world.
After that, he reported the successful launch of the nuclear torpedo Poseidon from a submarine.
This is an unmanned underwater vehicle, Poseidon, also with the nuclear power unit. For the first time, we managed not only to launch it from the starting device of the underwater carrier, but also to initiate the important nuclear power unit.
But all the threats turned out to be pointless. And now Putin should think carefully about what stories to tell next time. Because now Washington has given a clear response showing the world its new nuclear weapon. On October 29th, a bomber was spotted over California with an unusual object under its wing. It was the latest nuclear missile developed as part of a secret program to modernize the US nuclear arsenal. Defense News called it a leap into a new era of strategic deterrence, noting that the missile is smaller, stealthier, and far more lethal than its predecessors. It is built using stealth technology, which allows it to evade detection by enemy radars. The public appearance of the missile under the wing of a B-52 bomber was its first demonstration in an actual flight. And this was an official test flight, not a training exercise. With a range of over 2,400 kilometers, the new missile allows American bombers to strike even beyond the reach of the most advanced air defense systems. Let us recall that at the end of October, US President Donald Trump ordered the Pentagon to immediately begin testing nuclear weapons, after Putin boasted to everyone about the capabilities of the Burevestnik. Well, let's see what the Russian dictator will brag about next.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
An urgent Kremlin scandal has erupted with renewed force. Gerasimov has found himself at the center of a massive scheme. He siphoned resources from his own army while soldiers are barely surviving at the front. The supposedly invincible Russian army turned out to be just a cover for the elites who are looting the state during the war. Moscow is seething with rage, Putin is cornered, and Gerasimov is teetering between survival and political destruction. Will the Kremlin dare to sacrifice the general, or will it once again sweep everything under the rug, allowing him to continue enriching himself through blood and lies? All the details are in the following report.
Corruption, luxury, and cronyism are the three pillars supporting the hybrid general, chief of the general staff, Valery Gerasimov. Compared to his former colleagues, his patron Sergei Shoigu and Shoigu's money man Timur Ivanov, the shriveled, silent Gerasimov looks as poor as a church mouse. But let that not fool anyone.
Are you sitting here, my dears? Your children are currently working hard for a living, creating and producing videos for YouTube. Do you truly believe that you are the absolute masters of this life, the ones who are in complete control of everything that happens?
Gerasimov is the author of the hybrid warfare formula that the Russians first tested in Donbass and then in Syria. Since January 2023, he has been appointed commander of the joint group of occupying forces in Ukraine. And he is hardly any different from other armchair generals, who send thousands to die on the battlefield while pocketing millions for themselves. The only thing that sets silent Gerasimov apart is his extraordinary secrecy. He does not give interviews and tries to hide all information about his property. But even the scraps of information that journalists have uncovered make it clear that this military official lives on much more than just his salary. The official income of the Gerasimov family is a secret. Journalists are working with figures from before the full-scale invasion.
Gerasimov's declaration is deliberately modest. The official income of Gerasimov and his wife since 2009 is just under 31 million rubles. At the same time, almost a third of this amount was received by the general in 2018. On average, the chief of the general staff earns 2.9 million rubles per year, and his wife earns just over 167,000 rubles. However, the value of his real estate is completely disproportionate to this income. Journalists have calculated that the family of the head of the Russian general staff, Valery Gerasimov, owns property. Well, despite that, as it may seem perhaps in some ways, the remarkably modest
salary of a military official, he managed to purchase an apartment in an elite building not far from the GRU headquarters. Initially, the apartment, worth about 50 million rubles, was registered in his wife's name, but later her name disappeared from the registry. The couple also became co-founders of the Afinayeva Developers Association in the village of the same name in the Narofominsk district of the Moscow region. They built
the property here, a cottage at 6 Novi Dom with an area of 554 square meters and a cadastral value of 20 million hryvnias. And a few years later, he finished building a bathhouse of 236.3 square meters. Though it turns out it's not exactly traditional. It even has a real jacuzzi. Gerasimov owns 2 land plots here, with a total area of 4,313 square meters. The market value of all this real estate could reach 100 million hryvnias.
However, Valery Gerasimov hardly ever relaxes at the Dacha. It's his son and daughter-in-law who spend time here. Thanks to her photos, we can get an idea of the interior decor of the military officials' apartments. By the way, Gerasimov gave his son a separate apartment as a wedding gift. Almost 200 square meters, worth over 30 million rubles. And on top of that, 2 parking spaces as well.
Gerasimov is a typical Russian military commander of the Putin era. A shady biography, a lack of professionalism and no patriotism either. Just endless loyalty and devotion to Putin.
Valery Gerasimov not only provided his entire family with hundreds of square meters of real estate, including nephews and in-laws, but also entrenched himself within the Russian Ministry of Defense system. And his son, Yevgeny Valeryevich, is a civil servant. In the main Directorate for International Military Cooperation, he even managed to obtain the status of a combat veteran. Obviously with all the corresponding payments and benefits. However, on which fronts Yevgeny Gerasimov actually fought is also a big secret, just like the real list of his father's assets.
The Kremlin is once again defying common sense. Moscow is abruptly breaking agreements, trying to impose its own rules of the game on the world. The White House has long since figured out the Kremlin's tricks. The American leader no longer falls for Russia's paper peace. His attention has turned elsewhere, away from Putin. The Kremlin is gradually being squeezed from all sides, diplomatically, economically, and politically. Will this combination prove decisive, and will it bring the end of the war closer? We'll find out in just a moment.
Peace talks between Russia and Ukraine have been suspended. According to Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Serhiy Kislytsia, Putin refuses to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky, and the meetings with the Russian delegation in Istanbul have yielded no tangible results.
Under a dictatorship, it is impossible to have productive discussions with negotiating groups that represent the dictator. They have a very strict mandate, and they must defend the position they have been ordered to uphold.
As a result of the negotiations in Istanbul in the spring and summer of 2025, Russia did not change its previous demands, including those regarding the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine.
They are well aware of our position. As I have already mentioned before, they currently have our exact position clearly stated in writing. There is absolutely nothing secret or hidden about it at all. It was announced by the president, by Putin in June of 2024 when he spoke at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
At the same time, Lavrov stated that the Kremlin still expects a meeting between Putin and Trump in Budapest. However, the White House no longer believes in the Kremlin's empty promises.
Moscow's intentions can only be judged by its actions, and it has made it clear what it wants. It wants the rest of Donetsk region, and obviously Ukraine will not agree to this. Right now we see that Russia continues to carry out long-range strikes on Ukrainian territory, apparently aiming to destroy its energy system and, so to speak, demoralize the country.
Right now, Russian diplomacy is trying to shift the blame for halting the negotiation process onto Ukraine. Moscow has no intention of ending the war, but at the same time, the Kremlin does not want to be left without a dialogue with Washington.
The Russians are now making efforts to somehow break up this diplomatic ice, to shatter it in various ways. And let's say both formally through diplomacy and informally. They are currently working through the J7 and other communication channels. They have most likely tried to revive once again the Istanbul negotiation process. But in any case, the Russians are not ready to accept Trump's ultimatum. And Trump's ultimatum is very tough. Any political negotiations will only begin when there is active fighting.
According to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Washington has practically exhausted its potential to strengthen sanctions against Russia and will now focus on enforcing the existing restrictions. And once again, the White House is urging its European partners to put more pressure on Russia, particularly regarding Putin's shadow fleet.
Europe is also important, as it should participate in this negotiation process because this is a war taking place on European soil. And Europe, one way or another, plays an important role in ensuring, let's say, the overall framework of European security.
When it comes to ending the war in Ukraine, the White House administration will no longer fall for Putin's tricks, such as the empty talks in Istanbul with the pseudo-historian Medinsky, or the fruitless Alaska talks.
Trump won't be willing to agree to another Anchorage, Alaska. A political slap in the face from Putin. Well, because it seems to me he's already had enough of getting slapped by Putin, and that only undermines his ratings.
Under the conditions of significant sanctions pressure, Putin will likely have to abandon his maximalist demands and agree to direct negotiations with Volodymyr Zelensky.
A shocking information breakthrough. New data has lifted the veil on where the Kremlin leader is actually hiding. A triple game in the shadows. Moscow tried to cover up all traces, but the truth still came out. Elite residences once considered impregnable have come under direct threat. Ukrainian drones have reached even those places the Kremlin forbade anyone to look at. Panic is mounting. Will Putin really have to flee Moscow? We'll find out in just a moment. The secrets of Putin's offices. It turned out that the Russian dictator goes to great lengths to hide his exact location and where he governs the country from.
That's where Putin makes important calls, holds video conferences, and meets with people. And according to the Kremlin's accounts, Putin spent almost the entire 2020 to 2021 pandemic working there. Or did he?
After watching dozens of hours of the program Moscow, Kremlin, Putin, as well as the Kremlin website archives, government procurement documents, building plans, routes of movement for Putin and his entourage, as well as hotel bookings and business trips of state TV employees, journalists from the System project discovered that since 2015, exact replicas of the suburban office have been created for the dictator in order to conceal his actual location at any given moment.
The Kremlin uses these replicas to create the impression that Putin is working in the Moscow suburbs. In reality, a significant portion of the footage supposedly from the Moscow suburbs was actually filmed in decoy offices farther from Moscow. As of today,
it is known that there are at least 3 absolutely identical offices in different parts of Russia. In the Moscow suburb of Novo-Ogaryovo, at the Sochi residence Pokrovsk, and in Valdai. Each of them replicates the original interior down to the smallest details. The color of the walls, the arrangement of the furniture, and the decorative elements, so that the viewer could not tell one room from another. A complex system of duplicate offices allowed the dictator to record addresses and hold meetings from different parts of the country, creating the illusion of stability and a constant presence in the same office. Despite the apparent identical nature of the rooms, journalists discovered small but telling differences. The height of the door handles, the lines on the walls, and the arrangement of folders on the desk. It was these details that became the key to exposing the carefully concealed deception.
by drawing 2 lines, we can confidently say which room Putin is using. Here is the new Agaryova, and here is the copy office. And again, here is the original, and here is the copy.
Since February 2023, Putin has almost stopped using the Sochi office after he began to fear strikes from Ukrainian drones. The Bocharov-Ruchey residence, once convenient and secure, turned out to be vulnerable, and the dictator began looking for more hidden and protected places to work.
Despite the fact that several air defense positions have been set up there, it is still close enough to Ukraine and within long-range reach. With Ukrainian drone forces, it allows for a lot of fun there. A lot of fun. That's why Valdai is still farther away, it's better hidden, and the topography there is better. Well, it's in the forest, it's a residence in the woods, and in Sochi it's a residence in the mountains in a fairly open area. Well, it's scenic, you know, when you create a scenic residence for yourself, so you can see both the mountains and the sea. It's not just that you can see the sea, but people at sea can also see you a bit. That's why Sochi dropped out of the list of favorite residences.
Since the beginning of 2025, the same fate befell the suburban office in Novo-Ogaryovo. Now, Putin's addresses and meetings are recorded in 2 different offices, one in the Kremlin and one at Lake Valdai in the Novgorod region. That's where another office was set up. Journalists claim that the Valdai residence has become the main home for Putin's secret family, officially established with gymnast Alina Kabayeva. There, the dictator could hold meetings in seclusion and record addresses, passing them off as being from the suburban residence. He also has his own distinctive features.
The first is the switch. It is located exactly in the center of the panel, not like in the original Novo-Ogaryovo or in the copy in Sochi. The second is the seam on the wall, the one behind Putin's head. It is much higher than the panel joint. This office has its own writing set, its own beautiful pattern on the desk. In total, we found over 150 photos of this office. Well, that's from those we were able to identify. Let's once again show how the 3 rooms differ from each other. In all 3 rooms, the seam on the wall behind Putin is at a different height. This is how the arrangement of the door handles differs. This is how the thermostats are positioned in different locations. And this is what it looks like, the desk and the folder for papers.
Analysis of video materials and movement routes showed that despite the appearance of working in Novo-Ogaryovo, Putin could actually have been in any of the 3 mentioned offices. Journalists have recorded how, in a single day, the Russian leader appears in an office with one type of renovation, then a few hours later in another, and then again in the previous one but with a new look. Somewhere since
2018, a process has been taking place of the complete merging of the president's personal physical comfort of the body he has with the needs of the state. That is, the king's body ceases to be a human body and becomes a vast state hyper-object within which clinics, secret residences, and a second family appear. In fact, he divorced his first wife, though not in parallel with the second one. And all of this no longer works in the sense of, let's at least pretend, that the president abides by the rules, fulfills the requirements, or let's build everything in such a way that it's simply convenient for the president.
And while the Kremlin creates the appearance of stability and power, in reality, the Russian dictator is afraid. He fears Ukrainian attacks, fears losing power, fears any signs of instability. That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hatsakalo, with you. Even more scorching news in our next broadcast. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you!